week 2 of Pathmakers and Pioneers, and the discussion was really rich last week, so we hope that this one's going to be just as good. So today we're looking at what strategies can be implemented to ensure that Black British history and contributions can accurately be represented and celebrated within the National Archives from the Black artists and historians that pioneered the historical narratives till today. So I'm here with Gaverne Bennett, Kayne Kawasaki, and Susan Pitter. So who wants to kick off on that one?
Everybody's looking this way.
Yeah.
I don't know why I looked this way.
To start as well, because the last conversation last week, we kind of ended just at the beginning of this, where the conversation was going. So, I'll leave it with you.
Okay. So I think in terms of accuracy, because I think that's the key, isn't it? The accuracy, the authenticity of it as well. I think that, first of all, it means a stepping back from where those stories are going to be placed and expressed and go to the sources of those stories. And that is with the communities and individuals whose stories we want to accurately represent. Some of the most successful projects that I've worked on personally have been those that have done call-outs to communities, to individuals, not just for oral histories, but for ephemera, for objects, for the things that tell our stories. And I think I've referred to it sometimes, the memory of things. So somebody brought in a paraffin heater. Somebody else brought in, the deck from their first sound system and so on. And there's conversations that come out of those. I think that's really important to get those that know, those that lived it, to tell it.
So, no, carry on. Sorry,
so I think that's really important. I think the other thing as well is to go beyond the expectation that sometimes exist in spaces that are not ours around the quality of what is presented. Excellence should run right the way through. But I think there has been an expectation that things are going to be, just a community display kind of thing. And I think there is nothing wrong with excellence being centered on communities and stories.
And this is one thing that I have an issue with, and I totally agree with everything you said there. But what I find that they reach out to us, excuse me, and there's a way of those organisations that reaching out to individuals and whatsoever, which is so important, like you said, but they never give us the value of the information that we're providing to them. And I've sat in spaces where it's okay, we want to do this project. It is about, I'm just going to say Black culture, just on a totality. We're going to reach out to the community and get them to come in and do this and that. And then there's an expert over here, a white middle class expert normally. We're going to pay, we've got some funding. We're going to pay them the money for the funding. But we'll just kind of, but we know we've got to give them a little bit of money. So we'll give them a small pittance, but without my value, or without, not me personally, the value of the information that you're getting from those people, you can't do your project. And I think that there needs to be a balance. And I don't think that there is at the moment. I don't think that they're valuing the information that they need and that they want and they have to have. And until that happens, I think we're still in this kind of no man's land.
I think, sorry, just to round up on that, I think I've been fortunate in that, well, it's not down to fortune, actually, it's been down to intent. That I have taken the project ideas to those institutions and said, this is the story you haven't told. This is the story that has not been told in this city. Here is how it can be achieved. Do you want to partner or not?
Definitely, because that's how I do it. But there's not many of us.
Right. Right.
So yes, take us out of the situation. Think about it holistically when you're going in and you're talking to these organisations. That's really the response they get. They know if they come to me, they come to you. They're going to have to. It's going to have to be valued, and it's going to. We will make sure because we're doing it from our end. But if we leave it to the organisations, the institutions, the educational departments
in their own projects, you mean? Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to the very first question last week, when we were talking about who is commissioning and who is programming, and so on. I think therein lies the issue. Then, if it's something that is going to come from the organisation, then I think that they need to interrogate themselves around, well, the reasoning behind it, the reach behind it, the excellence, the story, and see whether they are best placed to tell that, or whether they need and have to work with others to tell those stories. I think that the one final thing, the other thing as well, I think in terms of accuracy, is making sure that the stories that we do tell, the narratives that we express and exhibit and share, and in whatever form or formats they're in, I think we also need to start recognizing more, with no disrespect at all, that we are more than within the boundaries of the M25, that we are more than London, that we are, of course I'm going to say Leeds, that of course I'm going to say Leicester. I know you're what you represent on your social media
London
platforms is national, and I applaud you for that, and I think that's what's so engaging about that. Because social media is more than just a bubble, but those stories are there not just in London or Leeds, or they're in unexpected places as well, or so-called unexpected, all the way up in Scotland, and places that people think are remote but aren't really, as well. And there are narratives there that have different sub-narratives wherever you go. So I think there is a case as well in terms of accuracy is around authenticity, quality, and also place as well. I do.
No, agreed.
Wow, so there's lots to unpack there, but it's interesting. I mean, one thing I'll say, I'm not a paid representative of the Black Cultural Archive. Okay, I'm speaking for myself, but I think one of the things I do is really, really important, because it goes back to what you're saying, that one of the things I try to do is to make sure that history and representation is recorded in Black people's voice themselves, in the way that we want to say it, right? And so that's one thing. The other thing is, we have to contend a bit with history here, right? Because why are we talking about accuracy in this way? Because for a long time we were literally slandered, all right? Right? I was talking at this anniversary for James Baldwin the other day, and I said to people there, you go into this library now and James Baldwin's on the shelf. But I remember going, look, I sound like an old man here, but I don't care. I don't care, right? You go into the library now, we went to the library 25 years ago, 30 years ago. The books you used to see about Black people were Tintin, right? Tintin in Africa. And I said, it was not Wakanda in Africa, right? It was Black people wearing pots and so on. So when we're talking about accuracy, to a certain extent, we're dealing with this whole legacy, which is still very much with us now, right? It's not gone away. I didn't say it yesterday, but it's one of the things I wanted to say today, is that sometimes we talk about things like it was in the past. Oh, that was back in the day. It was terrible back in the day. No. Some of that legacy is sitting on our shoulders right now. Sometimes when we're trying to tell our story, sometimes you'll be contradicted, because some of your story doesn't fit a certain narrative, like the joy thing you were mentioning yesterday. Sometimes I've tried to express things to people, and I say, but what was amazing was there was this singer, and we knew he was a genius at the time, but the rest of the world didn't recognize it. And we were so, in a way, we were happy with that, because we knew we were like the forefront of something, and that people would be listening to this 1,000 years from now, right? And it was a wonderful feeling. They said, no, that's not what I read. It was more like Oliver Twist, wasn't it? you were having, so that thing about accuracy, I think we have to recognize there's the weight of history as well, that we're kind of pushing back against. The only thing where I slightly disagree with you, right? Slightly disagree is, look, I think there's a pressure on Black people sometimes to be absolutely excellent, right? Okay? Absolutely excellent all the time. One of the things I actually enjoyed was, I remember there was a time when Black music, whenever you saw a Black musician on TV or something, right? They were literally on the level of Marvin Gaye. Okay? Or Michael Jackson. Everything was perfect, right? Every move, right? And I remember a few years ago, you started to see what I would call average artists, but I was glad because I thought, right, there's not that pressure on black people to be, up there all the time. Because that's what I've got a bit of a social work background here, right? That's what part of produces a mental illness with us sometimes. Because you go in there and you think, you know what, I can't drop a note. If I drop a note, everything's going to be thrown out. No. Sometimes you can be average like a white middle class person is average. I see things all the time. Absolutely average to subpar. Right? And no one says anything. It's like, that was okay. I think we have to sometimes allow ourselves a bit of space. If you produce something and it's not that great, right? We always try to reach greatness. But if somebody comes to you and says, well, that's not, I was going to say Michael Jackson, but he's maybe not the best choice at the moment, right? But I know I can't say Kanye West, and I'm not going to say what's his name. I'm sorry, Tupac. He's not Rakim. Let's say Rakim, right? Okay, we can all agree on Rakim, right? So you fall a bit below the level of Rakim, right? Who's literally a genius, right? The man is a genius. He's up there, right? Well, yeah, okay. 3 times out of 4 times, I was brilliant, but the 4th time I wasn't so good because you know why? Because I'm human.
I know, but does society allow us to be?
Yeah, this is what I'm trying to say.
So I think I wanted to
so
respond.
can I just say something
Oh, go ahead.
This is where the confidence comes in. We have to have the confidence to say, right, yeah, that was average. Yeah, that was average. I'm not going to sit here and then, because I think sometimes you're under that pressure, to be at such a high level. You just got to say to yourself, you know what? No human being can really, Muhammad Ali lost some boxing matches, didn't he? No human being can win every single time, right? And part of the legacy I think we're fighting is it's a deficit model, right? Is that for centuries, we had to prove that our right to be in that space. We then get into that space and people look at you and say, like, what are you doing there? So for a long time, we had to be like,
So do you think it's changed so much that we don't have to anymore?
No, I'm okay. I'm not going to name any names, all right? And I'm not even going to give anyone any eye contact or anything because you get any idea. But sometimes I see things now with black artists that, they're okay. They're okay, right? They're not up there. I'm glad because I think, you know what? That woman's song wasn't so good this time, right? But they're still there. Whereas before, if an artist or someone's trying to do an exhibition or something, it fell off a little bit, you were gone. You were just gone. And people might legitimately say that was not as good as the last one because the standard we were forced to operate against. And I think, yeah, some of that does still operate a little bit now, right? Because sometimes I see certain people do exhibitions about things and it's not so good, but people don't have a go at it, right? But when a black person does something sometimes and it's just like, it's all right, it's not extraordinary. It's like people are like, why am I watching this? This is a waste of taxpayers' money. And I think, but the amount of things I have to see that are, I'm not, it's not like
absolutely.
a disagreement. It's just,
of course not, and we should be able to do that. But perhaps if I give you some context to what I was meaning, I'm not talking about perfection.
Yes.
I'm talking about excellence and valuing that content that is put forward, and also about bucking the expectation of what it is that we produce and the way that we produce things. So I know that there's the content itself, isn't there? That might be around the way it's presented,
yes,
or the spaces that we are given if we don't own our own space. So I know that I have been over the years, and no one particular organization. Assumptions have been made about when I'm going to look at a space, for example, for whether it's an exhibition or an event, and it's just because of the theme of the product, it's been around. The response has been, well, we can give you this little space here because that's what we usually give to community projects and to community displays and so on. And I think that's where I'm talking about production values. So I don't necessarily believe. Here's what I believe: that we do deserve better than something that we're producing as adults for all audiences that is better than a blue tacked laminated printed display.
And that
for me, it's about production values. And I think everybody appreciates that. Of course, the content has to be authentic and accurate and engaging, but I think also that all audiences deserve excellence, and excellence can be a tiny a tiny exhibition or a tiny event, you know, with, you know, like with community-based artists, but it can be great. It can be great. So I think I'm more speaking about production values than perfection, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And how do you feel about that? It's
So coming off the back of what you were saying, I definitely believe that one of the strategies should be that community consultation, making sure that the community are involved, making sure that those oral history stories that are so important are recorded and used and presented. But in addition to the community consultation, I also think it's important to have evidence-based feedback and community feedback as a strategy for these institutions. The reason why I think it's important is because, once again, coming to our last conversation, you know, it can almost, if you just, you know, get those oral histories from a particular section of people or from one person or a small group, where's the tangible evidence that the community actually rocked with it, that they vibed with it, that they agreed with it, that they want more of it? And we know that there's value within our stories because a lot of the time they are marginalized, untold, unspoken. So we know that there's going to be views, there's going to be numbers, there's going to be profit. But how do we know that the audience are rocking with it? So one of the strategies I would say is, yes, community consultation, but in addition, there needs to be some kind of evidence-based feedback in regards to how well it resonated with those that it's supposed to represent. And I say that to say, statistically, when I was looking at British Future, they did a study in 2023, and it spoke about 75 kind of arts and culture institutions, and it said that 50 of them did actually do some form of engagement in regards to follow-up evidence-based, may have been a questionnaire or an interview, or, you know, fill this out online. So people are doing it, but there's kind of questions about, once again, how are they then doing that? So it's almost like the deeper level of, yeah, you're consulting the community, but how are you going about it? Yeah, you're doing the evidence-based feedback, but how are you going about it? So I would say that the strategies are kind of already there, they're in place, the institutions are aware of them, they're using them, but it's just about going deeper.
I think, sorry, just to say, it's one of the things that I've found with various projects with different organisations as well that I've worked with, is building in that evaluation framework as it is, and having somebody, you know, that's great at doing that, that can take a step back from organising and to look at almost dispassionately, but still knowing, but still understanding and being engaged with the whole theme of the project, to say, right, we're going to ask people what they want to see. We're going to ask people what they expect to see. Then we're going to create a program informed on that, on the outcomes of that, and that program we're going to build in feedback mechanisms, whether it's surveys, focus groups, whatever it is, and then at the end we'll come out with an evaluation report that said 95% said this, 50% said that. These are the stats, and this is the feedback from people as well. And it's hugely important. Not just in terms of getting better, but also funding bids and so on.
When I did the Castor exhibition, thinking about that, I turned it all on its head, because I did the majority of the evaluation before the exhibition, which was like totally like what you're doing. So all the events that I had where I was getting the audience in and asking them questions, I was showing them images of the paintings, and I was asking those questions. I was getting the experts involved. I was bringing them in to have those discussions, and really kind of building a conversation. And for me, it was about audience development and getting people to know about the projects before it had actually happened. But all of that information that I took from those audiences, because I was asking, I was getting the questions that I wanted to know before I was going to build this exhibition. So I kind of turned it on its head and just asked all the. But my question further to that is, you know, we know that as organisations, as individuals, we predominantly work project by project, and we know that when we're dealing with the institutions, it is project by project. So to make it a clear, to get the initiatives that we're putting together, the information that we're putting together, that we're giving them, how useful is it? Because are we doing all of this, and then once the project's done, they shut their doors, and then move on. So the next time we've got to come in and do it all again, start from ground zero. And I know from I've been doing this for years now. So there is also always, when I do a project, and I'm sure yourselves are similar, that we have stuff, there's always a bit of that. Oh yes, yeah, I remember I had that. Oh, I remember that bit there, and oh, they did that, and so you can build it from what you have. But I don't know whether the institutions are actually doing that.
But that's where the value is, though, having that evidence-based feedback. Because I always say, anytime someone wants to repeat work with me, the first thing I lead with, in the most respectful way, I don't say it in this manner, but I always say yesterday's price is not today's price. And the reason why I say that is because once you've got that evidence, the figures, the feedback, you can say, here's the proof. So it's not me. And earlier, we spoke about, individuals that participate in the oral history. I've experienced that, where I was doing a project with Brixton riots, and, the large corporation institution was spending 75K on doing X, Y, Z. And then they were looking to pay some iconic contributors literally like £50. And I was just like, are you crazy? Are you dumb? How can you be offering these legends in the community such little, and they just want their story to be told. But me as a millennial, I'm like, no. Like, you're a legend. Your time, even in terms of your general job, how much you get paid per hour, doesn't even match. So why are you now going to come and provide your gems and your resources for next to nothing? So I say that to say that evidence-based is where you can come. And once again, coming from a social media background, and you see your numbers are obviously increasing. Naturally, if you were to work in any other type of institution, history, culture, music, whatever, what have you, as long as the numbers are increasing, your price always goes up. So that's why it's really important for us to know that as there's more interest in our oral history, our oral stories, our Black narratives, the price continually needs to go up. Otherwise, we're devaluing ourselves and we're devaluing our stories. And we've already come from that. So why are we going to repeat that?
Yeah. So is it about value? Is it about the cost of what we're doing? And because I think, it is recognised as Black people, we don't charge enough on anything. We don't value what we do enough as individuals. So is it about the price that we put on it to make sure that we are benefit? I'm not sure I'm answering that, whether we've kind of diverted a little bit.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Because I think, full all experiences, it's just like you walk in there, you know my price, and people looking like you're shocked. And then you hear that someone else who's done half of what you've done is getting 3 times what you're getting, right? Yeah. And then to understand that is the bit of history in that actually, that goes back into history, that for a long time, my stuff was literally not valued. All right? How many times have you heard of artists who made no money, but they're multi-million, we're still playing the music or doing the art now. And that does affect us now. You have to be honest, like I was saying to somebody here earlier on, right? That I went to an organisation once, right? And I told my brother, I said, I'm going to ask him for this money. He said, like, no, just ask him for like £500,000, right? It's like, you're mad. So I went in there and did it. And I thought they were going to go like, get out, right? But they actually went quiet, right? Because what I felt in that room is, okay, this guy knows what this is worth. This guy actually knows what this is worth and the value of it. So I think there is an esteem issue sometimes, that we're like, we're so glad that somebody's paying us a bit of attention. We're like, right, wonderful, right? Without realizing that there's something profound that we bring to the table, in the sense that it goes back to narratives, right? That's what I always say to organizations, right? Yeah.
No, carry on. Sorry, it's my thought process is going.
Right, is right. So I say to organizations to avoid that kind of woke war stuff you're talking about yesterday, right? Is look, we have to start where people are at now with the narrative that they know. All right, okay. So they know about Henry VIII and people dancing, doing little dances and stuff, right? But what we're trying to do here is broaden the narrative to say, right, we're going to start from what you know, but we're just going to add some of these extra elements in there, right? And whenever I do work with an organization, like I mentioned the Guardian thing yesterday, right? I did it in such a way that I knew they're going to have to update it in the future. Right? Because at the time when I did it, they wanted to talk about one thing, because that was the thing that was in the news at the time. But I was sitting there thinking, it was about Obama actually, right? I was sitting there thinking, this is much bigger than Obama, right? This is about a history that goes back hundreds of years. This is about all the things that people have done. So when I constructed the whole thing, I did construct it around Obama, I did. But I constructed it partly around the Black experience as well, because I knew it would have a certain longevity. And I touched on things that people don't generally talk about, but I knew were going to become more and more important as time goes on. So there's a certain confidence I think that we need to develop a bit more of, right? Which is to say, ask for the sky in terms of money, okay? Because you're worth the sky, right? And then also, there needs to be a sense with us that we've got something really precious and profound here. We've got something, right, which can tell something, tell people, I mean everybody, something about this culture as a whole. The story of the carnival in Leeds, right? Yeah, that's in Leeds. I'm going to stop, Tara, because I tend to go, all right. Okay. Now, you know, I was just talking to you earlier about this. When you listen to that, then you rethink the whole of British history, right? All I knew about Leeds is this guy used to play like a banjo. Right? That's fine. No, and so back in the day, when you see Leeds presented in the national picture, just this guy, I can't remember his name, George Formby or something.
Now you're going to start wars because he was from Lancashire, which is going to start the war of the roses between Lancashire and Yorkshire. So
no, but what I'm saying is that what you were telling me earlier, it was like, to a certain extent, it blew my mind a little bit, you know, because I was thinking, right, so we've got the potential to blow people's mind, right? Now you can either, yeah, I'll stop.
Yeah, because the one thing that kept on coming up as you was talking is this a generational thing that maybe the younger elements have really got it? You know, what we need to be learning, obviously, you know, generations ago, but you know your worth because you can see those numbers. You can see who's connecting.
You can see the metrics.
likes.
You can see the ages.
Exactly.
You can see
it's
the gender split. You can
it's straight
see.
away.
You have the stats. Yeah. The proof is in the pudding.
And in some extent, you know, if you know that one wasn't as good as you're going to know instantly. So you know how to correct it. Blah 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 blah. Whereas we haven't had that opportunity in the realms that we work into. So hence we have to be perfect first time. We have to make sure it's right. There is all these kind of elements to it. So is that?
No. Yeah. I mean,
I'm kind of asking questions.
No, I think. Okay, I will let somebody speak. I'll let you. Right. I think a bit of it is generational, right? Because you know, certain people of a certain generation, you have to be twice as good as everybody when you go in there. Right now,
I was told 10 times.
10 times. Okay.
I was told 10 times.
God, it should be getting better. It's getting worse. Generation.
I disagree. I was told 10 times about.
Yeah, but the problem with that is, I mean, look. It was a survival strategy, right? Okay, there's no point pretending like, you know. But at the same time, what was not thought about is like the impact it has on us, right? But that means if you think you have to be 10 times better than someone else, how much money are you going to ask for? If you're starting from that deficit model,
10 times more.
No, but I don't know. Because if you walk in there thinking, right, I have to do 10 times what that guy over there is doing, right? 10 times to get what he's getting.
Yeah, but you're 10 times more unique.
That's my part of my thinking.
In inclusive history and the pioneers. So say, for example, if I'm included in, say like 4 of us are sat here and I'm the only black person.
Yeah.
And I look at the statistics of where the country's at and I look at all that kind of stuff. I'm actually the most unique, special person here. So you need my voice. And if you don't have my voice, is it inclusive?
I like that.
I love that.
So when I was taught 10 times, I have to work 10 times harder. I did that knowing that it was going to pay off.
But that's not how it should. That's not how I was told it.
In terms of generationally, I'm not sure if that was the same.
Look, I'm hopeful, right? I'm very hopeful because, like, well, just listen to you. It's giving me hope. Actually, right? Today, right? I'm hopeful because it's like, look, I'm sorry. If you look at it's a fact, right? It's a fact. You know, look at a lot of things culturally that go on in society now. A lot of it does come from black people. I'm sorry. It's a fact, all right? Little dances people do on TikTok. I was just talking to someone about hip hop there earlier, right? Multi-trillion pound industry, right? What are people actually listening to now, really? What music do they really listen to? Even in terms of art, you know, when I go to some exhibitions now, you can actually see the clear influence there. I think what's going on is there's a gap. There's a gap, and we've got to fill that gap, right?
And that comes down to understanding our cultural capital and understanding that 10 times more. So we know that we're pioneers in certain spaces, be it music, sport, historical narratives, what have you, writers, because we worked so hard, that now needs to pay off. And that's where having this inclusive history and this isn't where we start to see the fruits.
But
so it's the roots and then now the fruits.
You know what? I was going to say,
So how do we change what we see, you know, what is happening at the moment and how we see it? How do we, change that narrative, or make sure those narratives are represented properly and cannot be erased in the future.
I was just going to say that. All right. I was literally just going to say it for it to come right. When I did that Guardian thing, right, okay, they want me to put sports people on there and just music. I said no, right? I actually said I will put up some musicians on there because I'm not going to miss it out. But I put musicians on there that were a particular kind of musicians, right? They were bigger than musicians, if you know what I mean. All right, they meant more than that. But I made it a point of pointing out artists. You know what you talked about yesterday, Susan, the full gamut of the Black experience, right? So somebody reading this thing would not walk away thinking, yeah, I know they're good at music and sport. They'd walk away thinking, hang on, this is a group of human beings, right? That actually, because of what's happened recently in history, very recently in history, now have an extraordinary story. And I'll go big on this, right? If you really want to understand aspects of Western civilizations, because I know a lot of people with these woke wars, right? Really, you got to look to us. If you really want to understand it, because a lot of the cultural things that we've managed to develop under pressure, under pressure, right? But the things that tend to come out of us, because of our position, because we were talking about earlier all the different kinds of people we grew up with, right? So there's a cultural perspective that we have, that I'm sorry, a lot of other people don't have, because they don't mix in the same way. We weren't forced to mix with people in the same way, and we carry all of that with us, and that comes out in the art that we produce. Now, when you present it like that, then it sounds like the king's platter. All right? You're fortunate to be sitting at this table, and I think that is the sense that we have to give more of. And the only way you can do that is getting away from what we talked about yesterday, the tokenistic thing, to say you're just a special Black. You say, no, actually, I come out of this incredible thing that for a long time was at the margin, right? But actually, this is a plant that managed to grow in the dark. Jack and the Beanstalk, right? This is a plant that managed to reach the sky, right? Without any attention, right? Without, massive investment. Can you imagine what would happen to this thing if you got half the attention that other things get that are not, frankly, not of same cultural value? And that's got to be part of our argument, to say, listen, it's time for a bit of light here. And I just said a thing about money. Look, the amount of people that I know that I think should be multimillionaires now, right? That's why I'm glad to hear you talking like this, because it's like I think what we should almost have a rule that if you go into negotiation, think of a price and ask 3 times the price every single time, because that's probably half of what it's worth.
Yeah.
In reality, but
I think there's a thing though, isn't there, as well, a couple of things. I think in the cultural sector, there's a lot of freelance working, isn't there? Yeah. And I think that most freelancers would say that they have struggled at some stage to pitch their value, whether it's their daily rate, their hourly rate, their project rate, their friends mates, to pitch it. Community, absolutely, and that is the thing, isn't it? Absolutely. And I think that the sector itself, that's an experience where because it is a lot of the time run by freelancers.
I don't know about you, but one thing I hate is to ask you to tell people a price. When they come to you and say, "Oh, what?" And I just think, no, you should know your value. What is your price? Yeah. And then if I can work with that price, then we're good. If it is outrageous, then I have to say, oh well, actually, we might only be able to cover this. But I would much prefer somebody to tell me what what their value is, because I just feel it's not my place to tell you.
No, absolutely, and I think that is good to hear. For especially for freelancers as well, and I think you do use your discretion quite often. Like if you're really invested in something and you want to support it, that's one thing. I think the other thing as well, especially for Black communities who, if we go way back to some of the first organisations and cultural events and artistic events and so on, way back, and if I go back to one of the first, certainly in Leeds, was the formation of the Caribbean Cricket Club by the Second World War Caribbean veterans in 1948. And what came out of that was, a whole slew of organisations and of community activism and so on. That was everybody working together. with no pay or Arts Council or Heritage Fund or whatever
It's
around.
still going on, and they're still volunteering to this day.
There has been a culture of, we're doing this together. We're not doing, for our community. We're going to get this off the ground. We're not going to be paid. We're not going to charge. We just want it to happen. And this is from tiny organisations, from mainly first generations, had to make happen through blood, sweat, tears, literally, whether it's buildings or projects or activism or representation or advocacy. And I think that has something that has gone on for such a long time, and we've become used to that, that when there is an opportunity to expand and to grow and to work with, whether it's freelancers or experts or whatever, that come in and do have rates, and as they should, it's, hold on, why are they getting this money and so on? And there is that tension there. So I think it's a couple of things. It's what culturally we've been used to, both in terms of the culture sectors, culture of freelancing, and as well as community activism and how we were formed. I think so.
I mean, I think somebody put this to me the other way, talk about an organisation that's still around now. And it's what the person that built it, and they said, "Well, I'm gonna flash my Abrahamic knowledge of right." But he said there's some people like our foreparents that were like the visionaries, right? Okay, so there's no money, there's nothing. They just put the blood, sweat, and tears in it, and they're kind of like the Moses generation, right? They had a vision of the promised land, right? And then you get like the Joshua generation, right? Who actually they get to the promised land and they start building it, right? And then you got the King Solomon generation who build the temple, okay, right? And it's working out where we are in that spectrum. Right? I think we're a bit like Joshua going on to Solomon at the moment, right? We're still in that fighting kind of phase where you're fighting to get the kingdom going, right? But you can see the temple being built around us. You can kind of feel it. It's just, I feel like we're at a critical moment, right now, where
But how many times are we going to say we're at that critical moment? We're at that critical moment. It seems to, in my lifetime, I've had this critical moment on so many occasions. And like we were saying on part one, you get to the point where something happens in society, in the world or whatsoever, there's a backlash, and it's, now we need now we need you, we've got a problem, we need you to fix it, and because that's how it feels, and then we go in and we do everything that we're meant to do, and then it gets sidelined again, and then hang on, something else happens, so it's another critical point.
Now the difference with this point in history compared to other points, right? Because I'll tell you now, when the George Floyd thing kicked off, initially, I was just sat at home, right? Okay? Because I thought the amount of times I've seen things on phones and da-da-da. The moment I really woke up, was when that statue went into the river, right? Because I realized now we're talking about what I really want to talk about, right? We're talking about where all the money came from, right? We're talking about like the foundations of this actual civilization. And the moment you start talking about the foundation of civilization, you've got to talk about us, right? This moment is not like the other moments. I think part of the issue we've got now is that a lot of people, because questions that have been put off for generations, right? Like in the 90s, the question was and then it was kind of put off and it went down again, right? I think because of the scale of what happened in 2020, the scale of it, the depth of it, in society, right? That you can go to a school in the Outer Hebrides. I get emails from teachers in Outer Hebrides, all right? Okay? That is gone so deep into society. The last government tried to hold that back, with this anti-woke stuff, right? But if you think about it, it did keep going forward, didn't it? The things started to happen. What I think is that model of the 90s, right? We all went down, and because I'm coming across more and more young people.
So do you think it is because the narrative is more around history and knowledge than it ever has been?
What it is,
perhaps on a national scale, I would agree, because even things like obviously Stephen Lawrence happened in the 90s, whereas the day only just became officiated in like the past 5 years. Windrush happened 40s through to the early 70s. It's only just become officiated in the past 5 years. So I do feel like part of the national narrative has caught up with that inclusive history, because now we have more staples within the calendar that are marked for us to celebrate in the national conversation.
But I think the national narrative has been blown up. That's part of what's going on now, in the sense that the narrative that most people have been brought up with this country, they look at the events now. So what's the date today? Is it the It's August 2024, right? For future, any historian look at this, right? So people look at the events that happened on the streets of Britain the last couple of days, right? And the national narrative we're mostly given, it doesn't make sense, does it? Right? Because the national narrative we give is Britain's incredibly tolerant, it's wonderful, look at America, right? And then, but the reality of most people's lives now, I'm talking about black, white, and everything, right? Is that narrative, there's something not quite right about that, right? People have been called foreigners, right? Who are actually fundamental to the fundamental building blocks of this country. So I think what's going on at the moment, millions of people are looking for answers at the moment. Look, I know, Tara, I know, because initially my feeling was, like when this whole thing kicked off, was to go to sleep. Right? Rick Van Winkle, it was just to say, okay, I'm not doing this again, right? I'm not doing this thing where I'm going to go along to exhibition, to art spaces, sit down with well-meaning people, everyone nodding in their head. This is so important. Yes. Gaverne, I'm so glad you came in today because you really opened my eyes to what's going on, right? I thought, I can't do that anymore. But then when I actually sat down, I thought, okay, no, wait a minute. The institutions are going to have to catch up with what's going on in the rest of society. The National Trust, there's a lot of wokery argument around it. But when they looked at the feedback, from people that were going into there, the visitors were saying, no, I want to know a bit more about this colonial history. I didn't know that all the oak inside all these houses come from Jamaica and was, right, I didn't know that, right? And then, like with it's a 200th anniversary of the National Gallery at the moment, right? People are fascinated when they see, all right, that painting that I've known, they think they've known all their life, right? They didn't know it all their life because they didn't know anything about what was going on with the painter, the conditions under which he was painting, right? Where he's getting his money from, and also what's represented in the painting itself, right? I think there are millions of people now that want to know. They want to know. They're demanding to know, right?
Yeah.
So that's the difference. That is the difference. Because sometimes, like
so it is about the history.
That's what the difference. The difference is, before we went to a certain point where people were prepared to say, okay, maybe you guys you're slightly British, okay, right? You're slightly British. We'll have you playing football sometimes, okay?
No,
you can be right, but as long as not too many of you, as long as not too many of you on the pitch, right? Okay, and you always score. You don't miss penalties, right? You can be part of what's good. The narrative.
Still the same.
Right, well, right.
There's not much difference if you're looking at the England game.
Well, but this is another video, right? It's another podcast. But what I'm trying to say is that the national narrative, to a certain extent, it no longer makes sense for a lot of people. That you just had to watch TV for the last week to know the national narrative that you've been given doesn't quite. This was like a super tolerant country in the way people are suggesting it is. How could you have what you had this week then? And you can say it's a vicious minority. It's a vicious minority of people, but they do represent something. And what I think some of those people represent is that old narrative.
So when we're thinking about kind of the heritage that we put out, how do you change that?
What you say is you don't say to people, what you knew before was rubbish. Okay? You're a stinking racist, and I'm going to tell you what the narrative, right? What you say is look, do you know about William the Conqueror? Yes, I do, right? Do you know about Gainsborough, the painter? Yes, I do. Do you know why he painted a ship? Do you know the significance of that ship? No, but it's a very beautiful ship. And you say, all right, it's a bit more than a beautiful ship, all right? Okay, right? Because we want to talk about where that ship was going to, right? Do you know about the Battle of Trafalgar? Oh, yes, Nelson. Yeah, right. But what was Nelson fighting over? Okay, what was the issue that had the whole Royal Navy? But the Royal Navy did these, okay, I don't want to be, no, I'm going to be controversial. I'm going to say it. So sometimes when you try and broach certain subjects, people say to you, well, the Royal Navy did stop slavery for a long time. And you say, yes, it did. Right? And people did risk their lives, right? There's no doubt that, right? But what was it doing 200 years before that? Right? Because we had to talk about both. You can't just say, right, we're going to start talking about the Royal Navy.
So it's building the whole narrative together. So
well, it's a bit like that movie It with Stephen King, right? I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this clown, okay? And because people don't acknowledge he exists, he comes and terrorizes people forever, right? For the whole of their life, right? And that's what we've got now. What we have is like, I've read this novel.
So are we the clowns?
No, we're the saviors. We're the black saviors. We're the black saviors here, right? What it is, it's a bit like that novel. Do you know what? Because I was forced to read it with my son to get him through his GCSEs. You know, Jane Eyre, the Bronte sister, Jane Eyre, right? So actually, she was talking about it in there because there's that woman in the attic, isn't there? The mad black woman in the attic who ends up burning down the house.
I've not read it.
Yeah, no, it's worth reading it, right? Okay. It is really worth it because the only reason I read it is because my son wouldn't read it for his GCSEs. So I said, okay, I'm going to share the pain. Okay, we're going to read it together. And we read it and we realized, hang on, no, actually, This woman's trying to be honest here, because the person that was stuck in the attic, she was from the West Indies, right? Yeah, from Jamaica, right? And what she was actually, that's actually a metaphor for what we've got now, which is for a long time we were literally the mad people in the attic, right? Or the basement actually, because we built the house from the ground up, right? Completely ignored, right? But we're the people that built the thing, know the thing, feel the thing, right? And then sometimes we burn the house down, right? That's what 1981 was. We've literally burnt the house down to say we're here, we exist, right? But we're at a stage now where we can't be kept in the attic anymore, right? You can't pretend like we just don't exist, right? What the difference is now is it's not just us that are aware of that now. There are millions of white people, other people that are now sitting down and thinking to themselves, right, what was that statue doing up in the middle of Bristol? When we're told, all your life you're told, slave owners are really bad, they're wicked, and you've got Mr. Big right there. So I think what that is done, that's affecting things culturally. People question everything. So our role now is not to just point our finger at people and say, why didn't you know that before, right? It's to say, okay, welcome to the party. Right?
But I think to a certain extent, for me personally, these were narratives that we as communities and families have been talking about for many years and have been implementing within our own societies very well. But I don't think that we've been, and I don't think it's our fault. I don't think they've been asking us, but I don't think we've been sharing that knowledge with people of other races as well as we should do at times. And some of it from a lack of them wanting to know. I think now they do want to know, so it's easier for us to share. But I know one thing when I was building the organisation as Opal, it was very important that I was not just talking to my own people. You know, you need to be part of this conversation because you need to hear it more than we do. You know, we have those implements where there's always somebody in the family that's got a really clear understanding of Black history that you can go to if you need knowledge, if you need, well, in my family anyway, they all
Every family,
yeah. So there are elements where we're very good at teaching ourselves and empowering ourselves, but until those narratives seep, which I agree, they are seeping into the wider society now, but I'm not sure how. I kind of lost my train of thought on where I was going with it.
Yeah. Look, what the contradiction is, and I felt it as I've gone into some of these cultural spaces. There's sometimes our people come to say, listen, why are you working with Babylon? We've managed to keep our culture together for these centuries now, right? And now you're going to just like shit in this way. Whereas I think sometimes an opportunity comes up, right? You've been looking after something, you've been tending it and looking after it. And then somebody finally says to you, all right, I want to look at it now, right? So you've got a choice. You can either throw the thing in the face and say, look, go away, right? I've been doing this thing I've been telling you about it for months. Or you can say to yourself, all right, listen, okay, you can have a look, right? Okay? But I'm going to tell you what happened though, right? I'm going to remind you that I knew this thing was worth it decades ago, right? And you're not giving me validation. The validation is not coming from you. We validated already. But also, I'll stop, Tara. I will stop, right? Also, you're saying, okay, you can come into our sanctuary, whatever it is, right? But it's on our terms.
But it has to be on our terms. It has to be, for me, I think we have to keep hold of our narrative, but we have to share that knowledge. Yes. And it has to be, it's very important that we know for ourselves, but to make a change, they have to know too.
And we need to know that, and we have to be
unapologetic about it. And that's the thing for me, let's stop apologizing for having the knowledge, knowing more, or knowing that we're better. We've really got to, and that, so it is that value that you was talking about before, that there is kind of, this is our knowledge, we have it. I'm not saying we're better at everything, but on this subject, when we're talking about Black history, yeah.
No, but it's more than that.
I grew up in a time when I was working within the museums, and every person that came and spoke about African culture or anything to do with Africa was white and middle class. And it just was like, and then on various exhibitions that I've developed, when you're looking for the experts on specific objects, you're going to go to a white European. And you know, with the exhibition before last, I don't know if you know, Knowledge of the Unseen, we took that whole section out and we went directly to Africa, and we went directly to scholars, we found elders that spoke to us, because we said to them, we don't want to hear that. We want to hear what you think of it. So we got the narratives, the social history narratives of the objects. We found out why they were created, who they were created for, what those objects had value to the communities that they'd been made from, and more importantly, that they would have never been removed from the families, the majority. So without saying, you stole this, we said it, but we didn't need to say it's stolen. All we needed to say is this would never have left the family. This is a sacred piece. It was within this family. It would have never been removed. It would have never been sold. It would have never been given.
But that's not the answer to the woke thing, right? So you're being woke.
Well,
So
what's
no,
woke
you just
about
say
that?
no.
That's
All I'm
true.
saying
It's
is
honest. It's
this
fact.
object was in this place.
I
right?
don't find that woke. I find that factual.
No, but this is the thing. What I'm trying to say is it's been turned to some emotional thing, right? You're bringing down the dimension, but you know what you're saying is this thing was in one place at one point, and how did it get from there to there? I'm just going to tell you the story of how that happened, right? As to what you want to read into that, that's fine, right? We can interpret in different ways, but we do have to accept that A, B, C happened, right? And we can verify that happened. And now we can have a conversation about what that means, right? I think the real issue here is, look, there is a narrative that's developed for a long time, right? Which has only started to break in the last 20, 30 years, right? And the narrative I'm talking about has existed for like at least 300 years. And it's just starting to break now. Part of the issue is when you break a narrative, what narrative replaces it? What narrative?
How do you feel about that?
I don't know if I'm answering this question or another one, but somewhere in there, I think this is my thought around, can what we do in terms of the narratives we present and the culture we represent in the work that we do, in the projects and the organisations that we're a part of, if we go back to what has been happening in this past week, can what we do fix that? My thought is no. It can't fix that, because it's more, it's deep rooted, but it's also,
I don't agree.
it's not our.
I don't agree. We're gonna have to disagree, but I'll shut up. Let you talk. Okay.
Is it our responsibility to fix that? To fix the reasons behind why, the far right is on the rise, or why these things have been happening on the streets of our cities and in our neighbourhoods, and that people are being terrorised? Can art and culture fix that? Because if I'm just going back to what we've been discussing, can we fix that? Is it our responsibility? Because there are those conversations that need to be had around who is marginalised and who thinks they're marginalised, and who feels that they are communities, and what it means to be white and working class, and so on, and what that means to them, and what that means to be, and what it means to be a part of a black community that has been traditionally a black community, whether it's Chapeltown or Highfields or wherever. And I just wonder if it affects us so much. It should affect everybody the same way, but it affects us so much, whether quite often we put pressure on ourselves as the culture sector and black practitioners and creatives to try and fix that. I'm not sure that we can fix it. We can shed light and illuminate things in the work that we do, in the stories that we tell, that is incredibly valuable, and it's educational and it's edutainment as well, and so on. The stuff that you do, is not just great, but it's far-reaching as well. And the platforms that we do, the exhibitions that we hold, the art that we install, the conversations that we have, I don't know that fixes this that's been happening.
Yeah. I don't think. I don't think it can.
And what's interesting is when you look at the feedback from Windrush 75 and all those activations that took place, when you look at the evidence base, so one of the, coming back to one of the initial strategies that we mentioned, the evidence base says that 61% of white people wanted to know more. 61% is great, but there's still a whole other leap of people that don't want to know more. And when you think about Windrush, that's quite a safe black narrative. It's not slavery, it's not, white guilt, it's none of that. It's, if anything, a celebration. So to come to obviously what you're saying and to use, a safe part of black history, let's say, only 61% wanted to know more.
Exactly. Yeah, it's hard. So how can we can't fix who wants to know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's almost like you end up preaching to the choir almost.
Agreed.
You're talking to those who are already
those who want to know.
Those who are already converts, already on your side.
But you see, this is where I kind of partly disagree, right? It's not for us to fix it because we can't just fix it. We're talking about things that have come down through centuries, that have been put together, constructed way before our lifetime, right? So you're not just going to walk in and say, right, it's right. But that's the wonderful thing about art, right? Art can run ahead of reality, right? There were songs you hear from the 60s, we're talking about a world that literally didn't exist. I watched a thing about Sam Cooke, the famous song of his there about, right? So imagine a world without segregation in the middle of a world which is highly segregated, right? So what we can do as practitioners within this sector is, those people that are using art to run ahead of reality, to show what could be possible, is to make sure they get out there, right? Because that 61%, what are they going to be looking at? They can be just, okay, I'm not belittling Windrush by saying, they can be looking at a boat that came over in 1948, right? But then what about 2048? What could 2048 look like? Now, you've seen a painting or you've read a book sometimes, which is running way ahead of reality, haven't you? And your mind's been blown, right? We can do that, right? And actually, the wonderful thing is you can't be challenged because you just say, look, it's just imagination, right? If you can have Game of Thrones with a dragon flying around, right, then I can imagine a world where there's, all year round, all communities are represented at all times.
What I'm more saying is that arts and culture have a role to play, and in times of pressure and stress and emotion and so on, we turn to art and culture, whether it's to listen to a favorite song or to read a piece of poetry that we love, or to express ourselves through whatever we do that. I'm talking about the whole sector and being seen as the ones to fix it. I think we absolutely have a role to play, and art and culture can illuminate and should illuminate real life, real world, real history. But it being responsible for fixing it, it's much more complex than that.
And I would say another strategy to mention would be that community engagement, school engagement, etc. In regards to, because we know that, let's be honest, culture, arts, museums, things of that nature, exhibitions, they target a very specific type of person, regardless of race. So it's about extending that and making sure, because I remember going to museums when you're in school, but then it kind of stops there. So it's about, where are those local activations that these museums and institutions can target, bring them in, make sure that they're aware outside of school that, this is an inclusive narrative and an all year round narrative that's continually happening. So I do think that the school engagement, community engagement part is extremely important. The marketing, the voice, how the words, because some of these things you'll be talking about, decolonization and all these kind of things. And do the general public even really know what all of that even means? Do you know what I mean? We could talk about imperialism and do they even know what that even means?
I don't think that some of the experts know what that means. In all honesty.
It is true, isn't it? When we're in the cultural sector, broadly speaking, right across the board, has a way of creating terms.
It's very
that
highbrow.
There are those academic ones, but there are also terms and classifications. Like it was BAME at one point, wasn't it? Okay, and now it's it's global majority, and what that and people have to navigate that. But I wonder if that isn't just within our world of culture. If you go speak to Joe and Jane blogs down the road and ask about, are you part of the global majority?
They're still stuck on the word colour.
And that's right across the board, not of whatever community to anybody ordinary. And I think that's a part of, communicating within the cultural sector. Amongst us, it's one thing to create classifications because of, I don't know, funding. It's easier to say BAME, or it was easier to say BAME, and it's now easier to say global majority than to say black, Asian, brown, whatever. I think it's something to be looked at. And also what those terms mean. Does it make me more invisible? As a black woman, does global majority take away from that? Those are questions that, that we ask ourselves in the cultural sector. But when we're talking outside and communicating outside, it's a different thing altogether.
And I think that's one of the strategies. As an ex-teacher, I always say you have to break the most complex thing down to the most simplistic form. So for those who's coming in where English may be their additional language, you've got ADHD, you've got Asperger, you've got all these different kind of things and struggles that people are dealing with. You break it down to the most simplistic way that anybody leaving your classroom will be able to leave with something, otherwise you failed. So coming to our institutions and in regards to arts and culture, it's one of the strategies should be, has it been broken down to the most simplistic form where anybody can come in and enjoy and have something taken away from what they've learned?
I think when you're creating an exhibition, that is very much what you have to do anyway. But what I hear from all of you is that we probably can't change, or we can't, as much as we try and put certain strategies in place and develop certain ideas, although it's not changeable, it's not within our within our reach of being able to change. We can document, and we can kind of my words today, I'm all over the place. We can kind of put that representation in and make sure we are being represented in a way that we feel comfortable with, which I think maybe we have not been able to do in the past. Is that correct, or do you?
No, I totally agree. I mean, one of the things is, sometimes you'll suggest something and it will not be picked up at all, and it's very important, but it's just ignored, right? And sometimes you're stewing inside and you're saying this, right? But the important thing is that you do need to say it. It does need to be on record that you've said it, because what I found is sometimes I've said things and people are like, this strange chappy.
Have you always worked within institutions?
No, actually, I was more in teaching, right, before. Right, yeah. No, but yeah, well, okay, right. No, but what I mean is the reason I mentioned teachers, because my whole view, for example, I'll give just a concrete example so it's clear, right? Like I was working with the National Gallery recently on something, right? Okay, but my whole approach was, what is the National Gallery to most people? Actually, it's a big institution. You walk into this big hall, right? There's these big pictures. You normally go and stand and look at a painting. There's somebody with a plum voice saying, "Oh, this is Caravaggio from 18," right? And you feel small and go out again, right? So once you put class into the picture, whether you're black, white, what have you, that's going to make you feel small. Once you put ethnicity and race, that can make you feel even smaller. So one of the things I said to him is, listen, we need to develop a compass, right? To get through these 4,800 paintings, which are daunting to people, right? But what is going to be the basis of that compass? So I said, that compass can't just simply be what it has been up until now. We can add some layers to the compass. We can add things, right? Now, they accepted it on that occasion, right? But there's many things over the years I've suggested to people, and sometimes it takes people a bit of time to catch up to what you're saying, You just have to have the confidence to know that you're right? And to stay with it. But I know you're saying, because there's a bit of that frustration, right? Because we know where it should be, but my attitude is right. And I'm repeating myself literally. As long as you say it, you have said it. You have said, listen, well done, you're doing X, Y, and Z, right? But then this needs to be done. Even if you're poo-pooed, and people does that look like you don't understand, or his accent's not right, or you're speaking too quickly, whatever it is this week, all right? Then because it will be, if you're speaking the truth, right? The truth. And I'm not being like Pollyanna-ish, if you speak the truth, it will always happen for you. No. But if you're actually in line with something, right? It will be picked up later on. Sometimes you just have the confidence to sit back in your chair a little bit
and just hold it. I'm a bull in a china shop. I don't do that one. I'm terrible. But I think the conversation has been really rich and it's been really enjoyable. So I'm going to close part 2 at this point, and we'll come back for part 3 later on. Thank you.
We don't answer to no more.